My name is Howard Wright. I'm global leader of our AWS for Startups business. I have the unique privilege of being able to captivate the hearts and minds of the most important startups and VCs in the world and get them up and building on AWS. When I was in college, I used to ride my bike up and down Sand Hill Road and wonder what I would be one day. And I always wanted to work on Sand Hill Road. Now, I didn't get that goal in my life, but I get to work with some of the best and the brightest on Sand Hill Road, including my BFF, Michelle Griffin. So, Michelle from Andreessen, we just wanted to welcome you officially and then bring up our respective bosses, Ben Horowitz and Ruba Borno. Please come on up.
Ben, right. Did you pick that song?
I did.
Okay.
I did. As a Ricky Rose.
Awesome. Well, how's everybody doing tonight? Thank you so much for coming. So I'll just briefly introduce myself and then get to the main event. So my name is Ruba Borno. I lead the AWS Partner Organization and AWS Marketplace. And we're really privileged to be partnering with amazing organizations like A16Z, where we're working with many of your portfolio companies. And we're so excited about helping startups build on AWS and grow with AWS. But I will say, I understand why the main event here is Ben. I personally am a huge fan. I have told Ben backstage that the book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, was just a seminal work for me personally, and I was so inspired. So I'm thrilled that I get to interview him today. So as I mentioned, he's the author of New York Times bestselling books, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, and What You Do Is Who You Are. But prior to A16Z, Ben was a co-founder and CEO of Opsware, formerly LoudCloud, which was acquired by Hewlett-Packard for $1.6 billion in 2007. He also serves on the board of multiple incredible organizations like Anyscale, Caffeine, Databricks, Maven, Nation Builder, Okta, Sisu, Tanium, Trip Actions, and United Masters, several of those AWS partners as well. So let's get started.
All right.
Mike fell. Okay. It's been 14 years since you and Mark founded A16Z. How has the venture industry changed over that time? And in turn, how has your vision for A16Z evolved to differentiate you in this market?
Yeah, well, it's a lot different. And there were kind of two things in venture that changed. And then there didn't used to be accelerators. So Y Combinator was just getting started, so that didn't exist. And then the whole growth market really changed. But in VC, the big differences were the model of VC was replace the founder would take you to 0 to 1, and then when you need to go 1 to N, you bring in a professional CEO, and they'll do that. And that's kind of characterized by Kleiner Perkins at their height, and John Doerr, who's probably the greatest VC of that era. And then the second thing was VCs did not market themselves. They didn't say what they did. I'm sorry, I'm laughing because it seems so weird now. But they didn't say what they did. It was like very secretive. It was kind of like this black magic, don't look behind the curtain, but we're magic. And so if you want your company to succeed, you need the magic. And kind of my favorite VC of that era was Doug Leone from Sequoia. And he had this thing that he would say. He would go, what you need to have a great company is great DNA. And if you work with Sequoia, we'll give you the best DNA. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. What the hell is he talking about? It was just that kind of thing.
It's magic.
Yeah. And so our idea with the firm was, okay, what if we build a firm that would enable the founder to be a CEO? And the reason we thought that was a good idea is because what if you wanted to go 0 to 1 again? What if you wanted a second great product or a third great product? And that idea kind of, if you looked at Amazon with Jeff, right? AWS is like this, it's another 0 to 1 that was done much later. And we all know if Jeff wasn't the CEO, that would never happen. You can't bring in somebody who doesn't really understand the company to go 0 to 1. And so that was the idea of the firm. And as a result, we had to explain why, how we were going to help a founder become a CEO, which is why I wrote the book and that kind of thing. So that's kind of how we got to here. And I think VC really changed and adopted to that model. And then we added, and then Y Combinator did what they did. And then, the other thing that happened is when Amazon went public, I think they $430 million market cap, something like that. Like, you never see that today because the public markets have changed through a series of kind of, regulatory changes from, fair disclosure to Sarbanes-Oxley and so forth. So you can't even do that now because it's too dangerous. The short sellers will kind of manipulate your stock and put you out of business. So as a result, companies go public much later, and so the private growth market has gotten much more enormous than when we started. And so those are the big changes. And for us, I think the big lesson that we learned over the years was the kind of more specialized you are, the more you know about a field. Like, we want to know everything about enterprise infrastructure and how it works in every detail, and know every company much better than anybody else. And we want to know the same thing in like crypto infrastructure, and the same thing in SaaS, and the same thing in consumer, and the same thing in games. And so we've really kind of redesigned ourselves to have tremendous, what we call vertical focus on certain areas, so that we can help people build really specific kinds of companies, because they are different depending who your customer is, how you go to market.
Well, I was asking Ben earlier what his next book was going to be, and I think you're going to have some of those chapters in there.
Yeah,
So,
maybe so.
Maybe I'll kind of bring us to the current situation, the economic climate. So, at least in our industry here, there's been a decade of nearly everything moving up and to the right.
Yeah.
And just at this moment, we're facing a global economic downturn. Now, you're no stranger to making hard decisions, and I reference the book often because it really had some tough calls in there and real experience that a lot of folks, I think, could get a lot of value out of. So I'd love to hear you articulate what advice you're giving to your founders at this moment in time. And is there anything that you would emphasize in today's environment?
Yeah, so it kind of starts with, Peter Drucker had this great line, one of my favorite lines in all of business literature, which is, there is only one unforgivable sin in business: running out of cash. And that is so true, because you can screw up absolutely everything, the product, the go-to-market, everything. But if you still have money, you could fix it. You could do it again, you could get out of it, you could go. But if you run out of money, it doesn't matter how many good things you do, you're dead. That's it. And that kind of principle in a time like this becomes harder to do. And the reason, and it's multifold. So first thing is, let's say you did a round a year ago. Well, the public market kind of comparables have fallen 80%. So now just to get to that valuation, you need like a 5x improvement in all your numbers. And so that's just a high bar to get to the next round of financing. So you either got to be cash flow positive or you have to get to that. And that's a real challenge. But it gets worse because at the same time, we're kind of like, I know the politicians don't like to say it, but I think we're going into recession. And when you're in a recession, from a buyer's standpoint of view, what's the first thing you cut? A new product in a new market from a new company. Like, I'm not buying that. I'm going to stick with, the stuff I already got. And so now you're going to have less revenue. So it's even harder to make your cash last long enough to get that kind of 5x improvement, to get to the last round, to get more money, or to somehow get yourself to cash flow positive. So that problem gets really, really hard. So you really have to start there, like, how do I not run out of cash? And psychologically for the company, that's really tough, because you've hired all these people. We're going to be great. We're going to change the world. We're going to be the biggest thing ever. You're going to make so much money. Please join me. And then I'm going to set up all these KPIs and the cultural things and all these ideas around being that thing. Oh, but that's not the game anymore. Now the game is to survive. But I know that, but my whole company is still doing what I asked them to do and what I sold them on. And so how do you get them from here to there? That's a big thing. And that's actually, I wrote a blog post years ago called Peacetime, Wartime CEO. That's what that was about. Like, okay, forget what I said. We're going that way, motherfuckers. And we're going to do it fast. And you have to kind of make that. And it's really hard for people because it's so inconsistent. But we're in Allegiant, and the kind of founder of the Raiders, the great Al Davis, had this beautiful line, which he said, "I'd rather be right than consistent." And that's what you have to tell your people. Like, well, but you said, yes, I did say that. It's okay, because it's better to be right than consistent. Let's go this way. Let's not run out of cash, and so forth. Now, if you've solved that, then this is probably the greatest time of opportunity, because competition is thin. You can get market share. There's a lot of opportunity out there, but you got to take care of the first things first.
That's amazing advice, and hopefully folks here are taking notes. So I'll take us back several years. So in 2006, that's when AWS was founded.
Yeah.
And since then, I mean, you mentioned that at A16Z, you really focus on making sure you know everything about enterprise infrastructure.
Yeah.
So innovators in every industry have been relying heavily on the public cloud to build their business. So you, more than anyone, can answer this question. How have you seen the public cloud impact your portfolio company's ability to innovate?
Well, like everything is so different. I mean, I don't know how old some of you are, but like in the old days, like when we started Netscape, to build that company, we had to like get the browser into a box and get it to fries so that you could actually buy it, because the internet really wasn't a thing yet. And then, the software, we had to build an enterprise sales force to sell the server software, but the server software you had to install, and so we had to make it run on AIX, HPUX, Ultrix, IRIX, Solaris, Windows, and the engineering required to do that, and then there were all different versions of all those operating systems, right? And so more than like half of our engineering effort was just fitting into the customer environment. And so that really kind of changed the whole nature of like, okay, how many features could you do? How usable was the software, and so on. You fast forward to like, well, what did it take to build like Snap? Well, like 4 guys, some laptops, AWS, boom, you have like something awesome. And that's just been such a big change, which is why we have so many more startups now, which is why like the companies can get so much bigger, the products are so much better. It's funny because I talk to young engineers and they're like, why is Oracle and SAP, why is that stuff such crap? And it's like, well, it's not the engineers, it's the deployment model. And the cloud deployment model is just such a massive advance in everybody's ability to build great software and solve big, important problems and focus on kind of higher level issues. So it's been amazing. Of course, I started by like building a company called Loud Cloud. So I thought it was a good idea. It was a little too early. Almost killed myself too. I used to be 6'4" and good looking, but then I did that.
So clearly it's impacted the pace of innovation and products and businesses being started. How has the public cloud, how have you seen it impact distribution and sales strategies for your portfolio companies?
Yeah, so that's also been a dramatic change. So in the old days, right, if I sold you software that you had to install, you had to install it, you had to train people on it, because I couldn't spend enough money on usability because I had to fit into your weird environment with all your crazy operating systems. And then you had to like have time to upgrade it to the new version every time it came out with a new version, or you'd be living with all these bugs. And then of course the new version would have different bugs, and it might break your training or your stuff. And so what happened is, in order to sell software, you had to sell it to the CIO. And the CIO kind of had a very difficult job because, that person would have to kind of integrate all this stuff. The software always broke in some way because it never quite fit into the environment. And so they developed this phrase called, "I want one throat to choke," and which is kind of like a funny thing because it's like, well, why would you want to choke your vendor? And the reason, though, was, well, it was there was always something wrong. So if one throat to choke meant like, I'm not going to buy from a lot of vendors. So it was really hard to be a new company because you could only sell to the CIO and they didn't want to buy from a lot of people. And then the big companies kind of would develop this language in enterprise software, like that was a drive-by deal. Like literally we drove by, we like took the money, we kept going, goodbye. And that kind of, so like how much, and the old enterprise software jokes like, how much does it cost? Well, how much have you got? and then that was kind of the sales motion. It was all kinds of those kinds of things. And then the cloud comes along, and all of a sudden you don't have to deploy it. I don't have to sell through the CIO. I could sell to the CMO. I could sell to the head of sales. I could sell to anybody who like has a business need because they don't have to deploy it. You don't need training. The software is usable enough. And, like away you go. And then now you get things like product-led growth and different kinds of sales models that are much more kind of customer friendly. Oh, I can try it out. If I like it, I'll buy it. And if not. And I don't have to go through this. You don't have to be a victim of a drive-by. So that's also been like a really, I think, welcome advance to the industry. And it's greatly expanded who can be in the software business.
If there's one takeaway, it's how much does it cost? How much do you have?
Yeah.
So I was at your CEO Connection event last month, and I met with several of your portfolio company CEOs. And I was just curious, what advice do you give them? Because I think a lot of the folks here, they build on AWS, they work with AWS. What advice do you give to your portfolio companies on how to best partner with AWS? And what does good look like to you?
Yeah, so I think there's kind of three things that, and depending on the company, there are different ideas, but for every company, one, integrating to the marketplace works. Like it works. You will get sales, it'll help you. You have to integrate with it, to make it. We even have a portfolio company, Tackle.io, that'll help you get into the marketplace really good, but you got to get into the marketplace in the right way. It's really like kind of fundamental to your success. The second thing is, and this is something that startups don't get right, is you have to align with the AWS channel, with the AWS Salesforce. And what do I mean by that? Like it doesn't mean, call Andy Jassy and demand like that he integrates with it. No. This is a bottoms-up idea. This is, you've got local salespeople in different regions. They need to find their counterpart in the AWS Salesforce. If you sell, AWS makes money. They want to help you, and so you've got to find them, partner in the account, call them up, say, hey, what accounts are you guys in? I'm an AWS thing. I can help those customers if they have these needs. Oh, I have a customer with that need. Like that's like maybe your best lead gen opportunity that you have. And so many people don't do it because they want to talk to one person. Well, there's not one person to talk to. You've got to align with the people who are doing the work, who know the customers, are in the accounts. And that's the kind of the second big boost. And then, and by the way, like in AWS has this thing, which is kind of a licensing agreement where the customer buys a big set of credits. Well, like if you don't know about this, you have to learn about it, because what that means is, they paid, like they said, look, I'm going to commit this much money and just give me credits, and then I'm going to pick the software I want. Which means if you go in, all you need is for them to pick your software, and then you don't even need a contract. They'll just deploy their credits and get your software. So you bypass all that. It's the easiest sale ever. But you can't get access to that if you're not aligned in the field. So you have to align in the field to get the credits, to get the access to build your business. And so that's really important work. And then the final thing is there's a technical review process, and you should go through that. And the reason you should go through that is, like, if you're in the AWS field, like, how do you know if this software is any good? If you're kosher, how do you know that piece of meat is kosher? Because it's blessed by the rabbi. Well, a technical review process, that's the rabbi, he's blessing it. You have to get blessed, or you're just not going to be trusted. And so That's the third part of it. And if you do those three things, I think you'll be kind of ahead of the curve and ready to really kind of maximize a partnership. Now, like I said, depending what you are, if you're infrastructure, or if you're an app, or what you are, there are different ideas, but that's something that everybody ought to do.
I'm totally going to use that. Anytime I get pushback on the foundational technical reviews, I'll say, sorry, we've got to get the rabbi to bless it.
or look, our kosher people just aren't going to eat it. It's just like, that's a thing.
So what I love about what you said is, ultimately people have to work with each other, and a lot of that is built on a foundation of trust. You talk about the importance of trust in facilitating a healthy and successful business relationship in the book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. Yeah. And at Amazon, for us, earns trust is the #1 leadership principle for the partner organization in particular. Yeah. So I'd love for you to just share how you build trust, especially in partnerships across so many organizations.
Yeah, look, trust is it's really easy to say and hard to do, right? Because what does it mean? It means like, I'm going to do something for you today because I trust that you're going to pay me back in the future. Like, that's a big thing. And so, culturally in our organization, we come at it in various ways. And I've written a whole book on culture if you're super interested in this. Not that I'm plugging, trying to sell books, but I won't be able to answer the whole thing in such a short time. But the first thing that's really important is we have one culture for how we treat each other and how we treat people outside. We don't change it. It's not us and them. It's one culture. We're one thing, and anybody who works at Andreessen Horowitz will tell you, we're one culture. It's how we treat each other. It's how we treat anybody we come into contact with. And so that's the first thing that's really important, is that everybody understands, we don't do this and then do that. The second thing kind of is, and this is kind of a specific cultural idea that we have, is you don't need a contract with us. If we say it, we're going to do it. And so be careful about what you say, because you're binding the company. That's like signing a contract. And everybody knows that, and everybody who joins the firm has to sign the culture document that says they know that. And it's really, really important, because trust starts with what you say. If you're willing to say something and do something else, then you can't be trusted. Your word is not good. So we're really, really, really big on what is your word? And then we talk a lot about trust in general, and trust and communication go together. So when you talk about your word being valid, why is that important? Well, they're kind of the same thing, your trust and your communication, in that if I trust you completely, you don't even have to tell me anything, because I trust that you're going to act in my best interest. And if I trust you not at all, you can talk to me all day, and I'm not hearing anything you say. So communication and trust go together, and so if you want to be trusted, you have to watch your communication and make sure it's right. And so we put those together, and that's kind of how we do it. My friend Diane Green, who used to run GCP and founded VMware before then, had this thing that she did. Is she's like, I want all our partnerships to be 51-49, 51 for them. Just to make it clear, look, we're going to give something to get to this relationship. And then kind of the final thing that we say is, and it's another cultural value, sorry to go on culture so long, but we take a long view of relationships because we're in the relationship business. That's a cultural value at Andreessen Horowitz. And what it means is we're never going to take a transactional view of a relationship. We never want to we never want to do business with anybody for a transaction. We're either in business with you for the long term or we're not. And if we only want to do a transactional relationship, I don't want that business. I don't want that money. I'd rather walk away from it, because that's just not how we operate. It's not our culture. We're not doing it. And so those are the things that we do to kind of build the partnership values.
Well, I'll plug your book. So it's What You Do Is Who You Are, for those of you that haven't read it. But I think one of the themes, I know you were earlier quoting that you'd rather be right than be consistent. But on the earns trust and culture side, that's where consistency really matters. And clearly that comes through with interactions with your team. So here we are, AWS reInvent. And we pride ourselves at AWS of constantly inventing and simplify and innovating across all of the business. Now, you personally, as an individual, have reinvented yourself multiple times.
Yeah.
From product manager, CEO of a startup, to GM at HP, and then obviously founder of one of the most successful VC firms in the world. And even within VC, just innovating with things like the Cultural Leadership Fund. So you've had to do that in good times and in bad times.
Yeah.
So would love to just hear, how do you think about reinvention, and what's the next best thing, or next big thing?
Yeah, you know, I don't know that I think of it as reinvention. I think of it like the big thing I learned on this was actually from my partner, Mark Andreessen. So when we were at Netscape, we had this, you know, we were kind of at the beginning of the internet, and nobody remembers this then, other than I'm sure Jeff remembers it, because that's when Amazon was getting started too. But like the internet wasn't the internet as we know it. Like there was no security, there was no state, there was no like programming language, like none of that existed. And I remember Mark saying like really early, like, look, if these things need to be done and we don't step up, like there's no telling how long it'll take somebody to step up. And in the beginning, if you go back to like 94, 95, and you read what people said about the internet, they would say, like, the internet is, it's some academic bunch of BS, like whatever. Like the real thing is the information superhighway that, you know, Microsoft's building or that Oracle is building. And they're these proprietary networks, the Microsoft network, and they've got, you know, and they had, you know, we had HTML, they had BBML, the Blackbird markup language, and all these kind of like parallel things. But everybody knew, because the internet had no security, no state, and you can't put security in after the fact. Everybody knew that, and all these kinds of things. And you know, he was like, look, if we don't step up, then it's going to go that way. It's going to go to the information superhighway, not the internet, and there's going to be a tax on every transaction, which actually Microsoft proposed as they called it a vigorish, which was like a mafia term, which I thought was funny, a vig. But anyway, like that was kind of the state of affairs. And like I watched it happen where, you know, Jim Clark said to Kip Hickman, hey, we need to secure the internet. And he literally came back three months later with SSL, like implemented, done, spec'd, implemented, ready to go. It had one bad bug, which we had to fix. But same thing, you know, Brendan Eich, JavaScript. We need a programming language. He wrote JavaScript in 3 weeks, like 3 weeks, end to end. It's like, okay, like if there's something that needs to be done, like somebody's got to step up. And it's not true that somebody else is going to step up if you don't. Like maybe they will at some point, but not in the time frame that's necessary for the internet to win, or not in the time frame that's necessary for history to go the way you want it to. And so like it's just, you know, when I think about myself, I'm like, what needs to be done? What do I need to step up and do? Like, what am I capable of doing that's going to make a difference? And you know, and that's a thing that I now instinctively do, but I definitely learned that from him.
I love that. Just what is the thing that I'm going to do that's going to make a difference? I think it's an amazing reminder to step back of what's the purpose of what we're spending our time on every single day.
Yeah.
Well, Ben, I really do appreciate you spending time with us here today. I know you've got to catch a flight because you've got a board meeting you've got to get to, but I appreciate you being here, the amazing support and partnership with your team, and just the insights from today and the insights from your books. And I'll still keep nudging you to write the next one, because we'll all learn so much. But please, round of applause for Ben today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ben.